Here are 7 of my favorite singles strategies that will absolutely help you win more singles matches. What you'll notice with these 7 tips is that we hit all 5 phases of a singles point. You're serving, you're returning, you're hitting back and forth with your opponent, rallying from the baseline, you're coming to the net, and your opponent is at the net. So if you get better at all 5 phases, you're going to win more matches. Tip number 1. I want you to hit a higher percentage of your first serves in the box. Whether you have to aim for the center more, which gives you margin, whether you have to put a little spin on the ball, maybe take a little bit of speed off, unless you're hitting a ton of aces and just blowing the ball by them and just forcing them into a return error, there's very little benefit in hitting a really fast serve, especially if your percentages dwindle. Try to get in the 60% range, 60 to 69, 70%. If you can get in that range of first serves, wow, you're going to see a huge difference in your ability to hold serve. I heard someone say once, you can't double fault if you hit your first serve in. Isn't that true? Get your first serve in and you will notice how often you hold serve. Now, tip number 2 has to do with when you're returning serve. When you are returning serve, and I'll just ask you this now and just answer it in the comments if you don't mind. Where do you aim your return of serve? Do you aim your return? What I want you to think of when you are returning a first serve especially is to return down the middle of the court. Watch the pros and how often when the serve comes into them that they return back to the center third of the court, especially on very strong serves. There's very little difference between a double fault and a missed return. I'm going to say that again. Everyone's trying to reduce the number of double faults they have. Of course, that would be a good thing to reduce the number of double faults. We just talked about that with tip number 1. But do you try to reduce the number of missed returns? Because there's no difference. You were unable to put the ball into play on your first touch, right? So missing a return is no different than double faulting. And an easy way to make more returns in, especially against strong serves, maybe a strong kick serve or the ball's jumping up on you, is to return back down the center of the court. One of the drills I love to do with my students on court is to serve to them and put 2 cones here. And they have to return my strong serve through the cones. If they do, they get the point. Even if they hit it out here, I get the point. We'll play a game to like 7-11. They have to hit 7 shots through the cones before they hit 11 shots not through the cones. I want you to start aiming your return of serve, especially against strong serves, back down the middle as a way to make more returns in. Now, before I go on to tip number 3, I do want to say, if you get a very weak server and you're inside the court, then it is a good idea, as long as you're on balance and you have the ability to hit the ball to the outer thirds. So I'm not talking about a weak serve coming to you. I'm talking about most serves that come to us, we're behind the baseline and we want to just get that ball into play. In order to win a match, you have to break serve. You have to win points on your opponent's serve. And what better way to break serve than to have a very consistent return, deeper the better, which is great, pinning them back, keeping them in the middle, reducing the angle that they have, return down the middle as an easy way to break serve more often. With tip number 3, we're going to talk about where to stand when you're in a rally situation. We just talked about where to aim your serve and where to aim your return. So let's talk about where to stand. It's important that you are on the opposite side of the court as your opponent when you are at the baseline. I'll explain why. But first, let me just show you this. I call this seesawing. If your opponent is in this corner right here, it would be incorrect to stand right in the middle of the court. You would actually want to stand here. And the reason is because anytime your opponent is going to hit the ball, you want to bisect where they can hit the ball. You want to be equidistant to the farthest you'll have to run to your right and the farthest you'll have to run to your left. So let's just take an opponent who's in this left corner. What is the farthest they can move me to my right? Well, the farthest would be the corner. The farthest would actually be right there. So this is where I would have to go in order to get a down the line shot. Now, let's talk about a cross-court shot. See, cross-court shots are the shots in tennis that pull us off the court. If you ever see someone scrambling and running off the court to get to a ball, it was a cross-court ball. because a down the line ball stays within the lines of the court, within the court you're playing on. Cross court is a ball that leaves the court. So they can pull me with a cross court ball over to here. So that means I actually have a farther distance to run. Now, you typically don't want to run laterally here. We want to run inside the court. I actually moved that a little bit. So right about there is good. So getting that ball is like here, right? So this is basically where I would have to go. The distance from here to here is equidistant to there to there. I am actually standing, bisecting where his shots can go. He could hit the ball off the court this way. He could hit the ball like that. I am standing in the middle of where he can hit the ball rather than thinking I'm always supposed to stand in the middle of the court. See, rarely is the center of the court the center of where your opponent can hit the ball. So when you're at the baseline, an easy way to think of it is wherever you hit the ball, that's where your opponent's going to go, obviously. So you make sure to be slightly on the opposite side. The same thing is true over here. If your opponent is here, and the next time you watch tennis, I want you to notice how rarely the opponents are on the same side. They're always like this. And this is why, because they're making sure that they're standing in the middle of where their opponent can hit the ball. So if I were standing here, by the way, the closest shot, I should say, the down the line shot is right here, but they can hit the ball way off the court. So even standing in the middle, I'm much closer to the down the line than I am that cross court. So I would want to be here. That means I can now be equidistant to the down the line, and I can draw that straight line like that there, and now I am bisecting. Tennis is about standing in the middle of the space your opponent has available to them. The only time you'd actually want to be in the middle behind the baseline is if your opponent is in the middle. That way, it's equidistant to both corners. An easy way to think of this is stand on the opposite side of the court slightly from your opponent. By doing this, and when I teach this to players, they are shocked at the number of balls that can actually run down. Typically, players just stand right in the middle, not even thinking about where their opponent can hit based on their court positioning. Start standing on the opposite side of the court slightly, just a little, couple feet, and it makes a world of difference in your ability to run down ground strokes you never were able to run down before. Now, tip 4 is when you're at the net and where you should stand. With tip 3, we just learned that you should be on the opposite side of the court as your opponent when it comes to being at the baseline, and they're at the baseline, because you want to stand in the middle of where they can hit the ball. Well, at the net, we want to stand in the middle of where they can hit the ball down the line or cross court with their passing shot. But we actually do it by standing on the same side of the court to bisect that. So I'll show you that. So here's the opponent, right? My opponent's in the left corner. If I'm at the baseline, I should be here. But if I'm at the net, I should be here. When you're at the net, I call it shadowing. It's like you're a shadow and you're going to follow them. When you're at the net, you want to be on the same side of the court as your opponent so that you are equidistant to their down the line and cross-court passing shot. And if I draw this, here's what's really cool. If I draw this line, notice, boy, that was not a very straight line. Notice that this dotted line is bisecting the down the line, which we already drew, down the line and cross-court shots. Now, isn't it interesting that right here, it switches. Here, it's on the same side as the opponent. Here, I'm on the opposite side. See, when you're at the net and you're on the same side of the court as your opponent to bisect where they can hit the ball, you're on the same bisecting line as you were when you were back behind the baseline. It just so happens to switch to the other side in no man's land. So when you're at the net, you're going to be on the same side of the court so that you're equidistant to the down the line and the cross-court passing shots. This is one of the reasons why I prefer to teach people to pass down the line, because most of your opponents do not split step, which requires a sharp change of direction. But most of your opponents, when they come to the net, they're too centered. So when you try to pass cross court, it actually goes right to them. Most of your opponents do not stand far enough over. Now, I want you to when you go to the net, but most of your opponents are going to be too centered, so the down the line is typically wide open. But when you're at the net and you want to make sure that you can cover equally the down the line and the cross court pass, make sure that you are about 2 feet over from the center. That's actually going to make it much harder for your opponent to pass you. Now, tips 5, 6, and 7 are coming right up, but I want to share something with you that is awesome. It is the Fuzzy Yellow Balls Singles Playbook. Look, if you're playing every opponent of yours the exact same way, you're doing yourself a disservice. And Will Hamilton has put together the pro strategies, and we know they're the pro strategies because pros taught him these strategies, along with pro coaches, on how to beat their toughest opponents. And what's really cool is it's all broken down in the style of opponent you're playing against. So if you're playing against someone who's a pusher, you're like, okay, page 11, and you go to how to beat a pusher, how to serve to them, where to return, what's the exact shot you want to hit when you're rallying against a pusher. Do you know the shot that your opponent is hoping you don't hit if they are a pusher? It's in this book. I think I just saw it. Page, hold on. I know the clock is ticking here. Page 14. I'll let you find out for yourself. The pusher absolutely hates that shot. And once you start hitting that shot, they will disintegrate, fall apart, and then you win the match. You can easily get the singles playbook by using my link in the description. I'm also going to pin it in the first comment. Now, if you're looking for new people in your local area to play matches against or practice with, maybe you keep beating up on all the people in your area and you're like, man, I wish I had stronger opponents. Maybe there are just a few miles down the road and you don't know who they are. Check out playyourcourt.com and use my link, playyourcourt.com/2minutetennis. It's also in the description and pinned in the first comment. When you use my link, you get 50% off. All right, tip number 5. You need to hit most of your ground strokes in singles cross court. There is a huge advantage that comes to the player who hits from behind the baseline. It's a baseline to baseline, from behind the baseline rally. The player who hits cross court has a huge advantage. Here's a couple reasons why. The first one, the court is longer cross court. So the tennis court is 78 feet long, but it's 82.5 feet diagonally. So if you hit a ball down the line and it lands 2 feet long, if you had just hit it cross court, it would have landed 2.5 feet in. So you will be more consistent hitting the ball cross court just from a length standpoint. It's also wider. Right? It's a wider court because you don't just have to keep the ball between the lines. When you hit down the line, you're going to hit to the sideline. You can hit off the court as well. So the court can actually be wider and is a bigger area for you to actually hit into. So you don't have to be as accurate with your shots. The net is lower, which it's only a few inches difference, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. Maybe it's 3 feet here, and if you hit here, it's 3 feet 4 inches. So it's not making a world of difference because I'd rather you not hit so close to the net that it makes that difference. But hey, you'll probably after 100 shots hit 1 or 2 shots less in the net if you just hit cross court. But here's the big one. When you hit cross court, you're in position to bisect where your opponent can hit the ball. We just learned this in tip number 3. Remember, when you hit cross court, you have to be on the opposite side of the court as your opponent. Well, if they're here, I need to be on the opposite side, which means if they're on the left, I have to be on the right. So I only have to go from here to bisect where they can hit the ball down the line and cross court. I am equidistant to those 2 shots. By the way, I just thought of this now. I had someone in the comments saying, Ryan, the down the line's a shorter distance. So you got to cover the down the line. I'm willing to bet there's somebody thinking that. It's not a shorter distance, especially because I just talked about the cross court is 4.5 feet longer. Because when you go for a cross court ball, you are moving inside the court. So it's actually the same. I just wanted to put that in there. When you hit cross court, you are now closer to where you need to be in order to bisect their shots. If I were standing here and I hit the ball down the line, great. If I hit a winner, that's awesome. But if they get to the ball, I am so out of position for their shot. Watch the pros. Watch how often somebody hits down the line and they get in major trouble because of it, because they didn't hurt their opponent with their down the line shot. So when you hit down the line, Going to here isn't going to bisect where they're going to hit. Going to here isn't going to bisect where they're going to hit. You've got to get all the way over here. So if you hit the ball hard down the line and you rob yourself of the time to get into position just to bisect where they can hit the ball, if they hit cross court, you are sunk. So many singles players lose points because they hit down the line and don't hurt your opponent. So that's why I am a huge fan of just keeping the ball cross court. Is there a time to hit down the line? Yes. Are we going to talk about that in this video? No. I have plenty of other singles videos where I talk about that. When you are behind the baseline in a rally situation and you really aren't going to be able to hurt your opponent, you want to hit cross court. The court is longer, the court is wider, it is a lower part of the net you're hitting through, and you are more easily in position for your opponent's next shot. Tip number 6. You're at the net and you're going to end the point. Do it with a short volley. When you come forward, it is in your best interest. Let's say your opponent's here. You approach to their backhand, they hit a volley to you. It is in your best interest to think of making your ball land in the service box rather than volleying deep. When you come to the net and you get a ball that you feel like you can end the point, do it with a volley that lands in the service box, because it will actually end up being farther away from your opponent and it will more quickly bounce twice as a way to end the point when you hit short rather than hitting deep. You see it all the time in recreational tennis. The player comes to the net, they hit the ball to the, let's say, the backhand corner for a righty. This player is moving this way and they hit deep. When you hit deep, you're hitting where the opponent is and now they have an easier time to pass you. When you are at the net and you are looking to end the point, which, by the way, not every volley you hit can you end the point. Sometimes it's too risky and it's not in your favor. But if you get a ball that's chest level or head level, maybe even a little higher, don't crush the ball and nail it. But I'd rather you slow the volley down a little bit, take a little bit of pace off that volley, and look to make the ball land short in the service box. Just like as you get closer to a cup in golf, right, and you're going to putt, the closer you get to the hole, the softer you hit the ball, right? It's the exact same thing. As you get to the net and you're going to end the point, you can think, I'm going to volley this short into the open court. Stay away from hitting deep volleys to end the point, but rather hit short volleys and you will win a lot more points when you're at the net. All good things come to an end. So here is tip number 7. This actually, I would say, is my favorite tip in this video. When your opponent comes to the net. When you hit short and your opponent is coming forward, or maybe they just blast a ball to a corner and then you feel like, oh, you're in trouble, and they can sense that you're in trouble and they start sneaking in, I want you to involve your opponent in the point rather than avoid them with your shot. When your opponent is coming forward, what typically happens, what I see with recreational players, is they go for a pass. They go for a pass down the line, they go for a pass cross court, they try to lob it and hit it over them. So in essence, what that player is doing is they are trying to avoid the person coming forward. Tennis is about percentages, and you want to do things that give you a higher percentage chance of winning. So when your opponent is coming to the net, you actually have a higher percentage chance of winning if you just hit it right to them. Now, it's best if you can hit it low. So if you can get it near their feet, that'd be great. And gravity is really good at taking things down. So even if you don't hit the ball super hard, that's fine because gravity can easily bring it down around the service line, maybe even in front of the service line. And that's the perfect place to make the ball go. Because then what happens is they tend to hit the ball up and short, you step in, and then you go for the passing shot, which is called the 2-shot passing shot strategy. Hit your first shot low to them, and then hit your second shot as the passing shot. So many of your opponents are coming forward with bad volleys, right? You're not playing John McEnroe. You're not playing Martina Navratilova. You're playing Bob and Sue and John and Carol, right? You're playing your friends. They're good players, but they're not professional tennis players. So when they're coming forward with non-professional volleys. You don't need to avoid them because of it. because it's more likely that Bob, sorry Bob, whoever you are, sorry Bob, it's more likely that Bob will miss a low volley coming forward than it is you will tightrope a perfect passing shot by them. You get the same number of points whether you hit a winner as if they hit an error. And since it's more likely that they are going to mess up volleys than it is you're going to hit these perfect passing shots, especially when you're running off the court in trouble, put the ball on your opponent. Force them to have to do with a low volley. Even if they do make it, they'll probably pop it up and you can come in and go for the pass. Start aiming for your opponent's feet and coming at them with your shot, and you will win more points when your opponent attacks the net. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments below which strategy or strategies you think are going to make the biggest impact in your game. Follow all 7, and there's no doubt you're going to gain confidence, win more matches, and play much better tennis. This is Ryan Reedy from 2minutetennis.net. You got this.